Gators Breakdown episode 65 is ready to go, where we will discuss the Antonio Callaway event that happened last week. And Vegas has put out their over-under for the 2017 season and what they have for the Gators. I'm your host, David Waters. You can find me on Twitter at GatorDave_SEC. And my co-host tonight is Joey Vizzi. You can find Joey on Twitter at JoeyV_SEC Sports. Bill will not join us tonight. He'll hit us up for the next show. But Joey, there's plenty to talk about. As you mentioned, I was on vacation and I didn't get to keep up as much as I wanted to, but you tweeted out the perfect thing. It's never a dull moment in Gatorland.
Yeah, actually, I was quoting you. I think you said that
yes.
Several months back. So it's just it never ceases to amaze me. Antonio Callaway needs a security guard hired in the offseason for him, just to kind of keep an eye on him because the offseason just doesn't seem too kind to him. And it's just I guess we'll get into that.
It's definitely didn't want to deal with that when I was on the vacation, but oh well, it is what it is. So remember, guys, you can find all your Gators Breakdown past episodes on SoundCloud, iTunes, and YouTube. The new episode as well, that'll be up there soon after we record this live version here on YouTube. Just search on those sites or get the links by following us on Twitter at Gators Breakdown and on Facebook. Just search Gators Breakdown. Also, share the show if you like it. Leave a review. Rate on iTunes. Share the word of Gators Breakdown out there to all your Gator friends and followers, and even some rival fans listen to us a little bit. So that's kind of good back and forth banner there. So I don't think most of you Gator fans have been hiding under a rock, but just in case you have, of course, we know what we talk about. Antonio Callaway has been cited on a complaint of marijuana possession, according to Alachua County court records, and this comes from the Tampa Bay Times here, and Matt Baker, who does good work there. He was the first one to put this out there. The Gainesville Police Department stopped Mercedes SUV at 12:50 a.m. Not this past Saturday, but the Saturday before for a seatbelt violation. Police smelled marijuana, found about 7 grams in Callaway's pocket, and another 5.4 grams of marijuana were found in the car. Also, Kendrick Williams was riding with Callaway. Both claim ownership of the drugs, according to the court documents. And Williams has a long criminal history with more than a dozen arrests in the state for complaints ranging from drugs and guns to battery and vehicle theft. So, and Jim McElwain, he's aware of it and is being dealt with. It came from a U.S. spokesman last Thursday. So, Joey, there's the story. I think you and I both said I think the decision-making from Callaway seems to be the biggest problem here. Not necessarily the marijuana. We know kind of the semantics of marijuana use now and how rampant it is through colleges and, of course, football teams. But it just seems to be Callaway's decision-making and riding with this Williams guy who has a long criminal history.
And that's what it is, David. And, a lot of people agreed with me last week when I was discussing my thoughts on it, and a lot of people disagreed with me. So it is kind of a 50-50 split, I guess, so to say, about people's feelings on the situation. Look, I have nothing against marijuana. I think it should be legalized. I'd rather people have smoke marijuana on a regular basis than be an alcoholic. I mean, I think it's a safer drug, I guess, than alcohol. But that's my personal opinion on it. So the marijuana itself was not the issue with me. Like you said, David, it's the decision-making. And also not only the decision-making, but why is Antonio Callaway hanging out with a known drug dealer and felon such as this gentleman? And it's not just Gainesville where he's gotten in trouble. I looked him up. I mean, he's had issues in Valdosta, Georgia, which is 2 hours north of Gainesville. So he's had out-of-state history. That's what I don't like. And obviously last year we dealt with Antonio Callaway and Treon Harris being accused of sexual assault. That was kept on the down low for 6 months last offseason. And then, in August he had a hearing with the university, whether they were going to take action or not, even though the lady never pressed charges against them. But it's just a repetitive thing. And it's the people he's hanging out with, David, as I just said. It's the marijuana, I don't care about that. If, Tabor had some marijuana issues, obviously, and, look at him, 2nd round draft pick. He would have been a 1st round draft pick had his 40 time not been so atrocious. So, the marijuana, whatever. It's the continuously bad decisions during the offseason. It's who he hangs out with. That's just, it needs to be addressed. And he's only hurting himself. He's going into his last year at Florida. We know that he's going to enter the draft after the final game of the season this year, and he's only hurting himself because many people believe him to be a mid to late first round draft pick. And if he continues doing what he's doing, he's not going to get drafted in the first round. I mean, look at Aaron Hernandez. Rest his soul, round talent. And due to Aaron Hernandez's issues at University of Florida, he got drafted in the 4th round by the New England Patriots. And I fear that's where Callaway is headed if he doesn't get his stuff together. And, we talked about, David, about what we think. I think you put a poll up about whether he should be suspended for the first game. As much as I want to say no, I think he will, and I think he should. And I, it's hard for me to say that because of it being marijuana, and he was cited. It wasn't an arrest. I mean, he'll appear in court. He'll probably plead no contest, get some sort of community service.
He's
I can't
already
imagine.
He's already pled not guilty, by the way. With that.
Yeah. But I mean, he admitted to the police officers that it was his, and he was high. So how far that not guilty is going to take him, I don't really think. So I could see a no contest. With pretrial diversion, possibly some sort of community service hours. So I don't think anything legally is going to come of this, obviously, but it's just like you said, this is multiple times where he's making bad decisions, doing the wrong thing, whatever it is. And it's something that needs to be addressed. And I do think that he is going to be suspended against Michigan. I think, and like I said, it's not so much that I want him to be, or I think he should be. I think he's going to be. There's a difference. Just based on the marijuana possession, I don't think he should be suspended for the first game. I don't. But the decision-making, maybe he does deserve it. But McElwain is not going to allow this to be seen in the public eye as him choosing football over doing the right thing. I mean, we live in 2017. We're in very sensitive times with politics and social issues and stuff like that. And I could just see McElwain getting buried if Antonio Callaway faces zero punishment, for this.
Right. And we have to remember, he previously admitted to marijuana use. He admitted to being, quote, so stoned that he wasn't willing to have sex in the December 2015 incident. That was the subject of the Title IX investigation that you were speaking of. He was cleared of wrongdoing in that case. So, I'm not trying to throw shade there. He was cleared. Nothing will, that's that case you mentioned with the.
Well, many believe that Treon Harris fell on the sword for him.
Yep, that is out there as well. But remember, he was suspended for all of 2016 spring practice while that was going on. And going back to the article, U.S. substance abuse policy calls for counseling for a first marijuana positive test and suspension for the second. But those only apply for positive tests, not citations. So as we mentioned, this was being caught by the cops. This wasn't a UF or a school testing, drug testing here. So, there's really no precedent or any mandatory or mandated suspension coming from this. Going back, McElwain has previously suspended running backs Jordan Scarlett and Mark Thompson after similar citations. So, we'll see what happens. Does a message need to be sent by McElwain? I would have to imagine after the past allegations and past incidents with Antonio Callaway, he probably was on thin ice. He probably had a list of things he could do, couldn't do from the coaching staff and Jim McElwain, maybe even by the school itself. And I'm pretty sure getting caught with drugs and riding around with a 40-year-old guy what college student do you know rides around with 40-year-old guys? We both went to college.
Drug dealer.
Right, there you go. That's been thrown around. And that's kind of one of the first things that popped in my head as well. So, it's a guy probably who's looking to get something from Antonio Callaway, but I don't know many college students that hang around with 40-year-olds. So, it's a weird situation to begin with. As far as, and you mentioned a poll that I threw up on Twitter. So it was, should Gators wide receiver Antonio Callaway be suspended for his latest incident? And as of right now, out of 200 votes, 70% say no, he should not be suspended. Now, let's remember, we have, and like Joey mentioned, we haven't court date set for June 6th. It hasn't went to court yet, so I'm sure a lot of people's opinions come from that. If he's found guilty, then maybe that sways some decision and he should be suspended. If he's found not guilty, you will have a hard time, I think, finding a way to suspend unless it's just like I mentioned, he's on thin ice. He has some decisions or, some parameters that he had to meet from the university. I'm sure this wasn't one of them. So the university could be walking on thin ice. Could they suspend him even though he's found not guilty or no contest? We'll see. This is a kind of a tricky situation, but some things out there from the fans, some replies from there. Jay Ferg, he's pled not guilty, so nothing should be done until the case is over with. James, Cravenson James on Twitter, I don't think marijuana is a bad thing. In fact, should be legal, but yes, should be suspended. Clint Lawrence, pains me to say I voted yes. Can't wait to hear what y'all think. Josh Gann, yes, he should be suspended. Lean on run game. Got Massey back with Cleveland and Powell. TK Tailgater 196, held to the no. That was a gif he threw out there. So that was funny. And Fourth and Jort says nah as well with that 70s show, shaking his head. Coach Clay had a good point. Didn't suspend every player on the team. He hasn't tested positive for anything. First time in trouble with police, not necessarily. So he says no. Chris James, the last one here, hell no. Pull Alabama, suspend him for week 2, but he needs to be on the field against Michigan. So, Joey, that kind of raises an interesting point. What happens if you don't suspend him for Michigan and you do suspend him for Northern Colorado? That's not necessarily getting
obvious. Either you suspend him for game 1 or you don't suspend him at all.
Right, I completely agree.
That'll never happen, and that's not going to happen.
Yeah, because my thing is, what did Callaway really learn if he's only missing Northern Colorado?
Or, that would be the most obvious, thing ever in the world. But, unfortunately, this year it just so happens that Florida is not playing an opener against a inferior opponent. Yeah. So, the one year where Florida's not playing a team like Northern Colorado in game 1 is the year that Callaway faces a suspension for the game. And that is against probably a top 5 or top 6 Michigan team. So it just so happens that this is that year. It's tough, man. Like I said, I'm torn because, like I said, I think the issue in itself was a big issue? No. But do I think that it's the repetitiveness, this being a multiple issue of decision-making and the individual he was hanging around with and seems to hang around with, then I think it becomes a bigger issue.
That's what I kind of, I think you and I both kind of see it from the same situation or same point of view here. It's, and it does vary. I think with the poll that I threw out, if it was Northern Colorado game 1, I think a lot of people wouldn't mind Antonio Callaway being suspended, but Michigan being game 1, and we know how important that game is for the kind of the reputation of Florida. Game 1, you want to get that big win. I think a lot of fans would just rather bite the bullet and play Antonio Callaway no matter how it looks.
Yeah, the competitor, in the fan in you says, this is a minute issue. Just play him and just see where the chips fall. But. Yeah. The University of Florida has PR issues to worry about in this day and age on social media because you get, Twitter warriors out there that come out and they'll bash you for anything. So I think if Jim McElwain doesn't do anything with Antonio Callaway, I think the university will feel so much heat from outside sources that I just think that it would be too much. And I think the pressure of not wanting that will force McElwain's hand into taking action on Callaway.
And quickly, since one follower brought it up, if this was Alabama, would Callaway be playing against Michigan?
Yes, he would, because Nick Saban is above the fray. Nick Saban is above reproach. Nick Saban's above the NCAA. Nick Saban's above the media. Nick Saban is like Greg Popovich and Bill Belichick. The media doesn't question him. He is. The media doesn't question him. The media doesn't come down on him for making bad decisions with as far as punishments and as far as what he does. And I truly believe that Alabama has committed multiple recruiting infractions over the last 8-9 years of his tenure at Alabama. But the NCAA will never touch Nick Saban. He is, like I said, above reproach. I think he is the closest thing to walking on water in college football. And I just believe that there's certain people that can do things and certain people that cannot. And Jim McElwain has not earned his stripes, and he's a new coach in the SEC. And I think that the media, I mean, we saw what happened with the Calvin Taylor incident in his first game that he coached when, Calvin Taylor got the unsportsmanlike penalty. How many people, Desmond Howard called for him to be suspended for yelling at Calvin Taylor. I mean, yelling at him for being a bad teammate for getting the unsportsmanlike penalty. So what's going to happen here if he doesn't suspend Antonio Callaway for a game for this? So, it's unfortunate, and different people get treated differently. Just like I said, Bill Belichick and Greg Popovich do, and unfortunately, that's just the era we live in right now, and it's unfortunate, but it's true.
Yeah, so I think in review, I think both Joey and I both kind of lean towards Callaway needs to be suspended. I think even if it kind of comes out that there's maybe no contest or he wins the not guilty charge, or it's just the repetitive nature of Callaway getting in trouble in the offseason, and maybe a message does need to be sent. Too bad he missed a game against Michigan, but at this point, it just kind of is what it is for Gators and Antonio Callaway.
But, if you want to look at it from a different angle, this would kind of give Jim McElwain a pass for that Michigan game. Okay, so he Florida does lose to Michigan. Okay, he was without his best player. You know what I'm saying? So that kind of would, give McElwain a pass. Not that we're saying that that's what he's thinking, but, I wouldn't be surprised if that didn't cross his mind, especially going towards getting closer to the game. Because I'm with you. I saw your tweets earlier. I think Florida can beat Michigan without.
There we go. I was going to go there next.
I think there's a lot of playmakers on offense this year that can make up for Callaway. Nobody is as talented as he is, but I think as a whole, with the collection of talent that Florida has on offense, I think that they could pick up the slack for what he would bring to the table.
Yeah, and even with Callaway, the way I'm thinking about the way this game plays out, and kind of the season, I think Florida has to run the ball to win a game of this magnitude. And anyway, so if the run game gets shut down completely with or without Callaway, I don't think they're winning the game. But, I kind of do believe with the offensive line and the running back say, but this is their first time, to make a statement. It's kind of like that LSU game last year. If they can come in and run the ball that way, I'm not sure you need Antonio Callaway. Yes, he's your best playmaker. Yes, you want him on the field. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying you don't want him on the field. But I just think the way that game can play out, I don't necessarily know if Antonio Callaway gets that opportunity to break the game away that way anyway. I think it's going to be a low-scoring defensive affair with all the new pieces both teams are fitting in on defense.
Yeah, I agree with you. I could see this game being like a 17-14 finish or, 21-17, something like that. Just because, like you said, jitters, big stage, a lot of new players. Michigan's going to have, about 8 or 9 new starters playing right now or this coming year. Florida's got a lot of new starters on offense and defense. Obviously, Felipe Franks is the guy, talk about throwing somebody in the deep end for their first start in college football. So
it would be scary.
I don't think that Antonio Callaway with how new Michigan's team's going to look. Now, if Michigan was returning Jabril Peppers, and a lot of their veterans, I think that Florida would be in a lot more trouble than they are in.
Yeah, and we'll talk about the preseason magazines later because I went ahead and picked up the Athlon one. But it kind of, if you look at the way they look at the SEC position rankings, they have Florida the number 1 wide receiver group in the SEC. Now, of course, that's with Callaway, but that lets you know how high they also think of everybody else.
Yeah, I mean, it's like I said, it's not just Callaway. I mean, Tyree Cleveland has a chance to be a first-round pick as well. I mean, he was the number 2 receiver in the country for a reason out of high school. And obviously we know about Dre Massey. He was a top JUCO recruit. And Freddie Swain and Josh Hammond. Brandon Powell coming back for his 4th year. So, I mean, there's talent all over the field. Obviously tight end is the question mark. And that's what I'm concerned with, I guess, as far as the receiving core goes. But I think there's just so much talent all over the offensive side of the ball this year that, like I said, I don't think that Antonio Callaway's absence is going to make as big of an impact as it would have this past year. Do you get what I'm saying?
Yep. I do agree. Yeah. I do agree there. All right, so let's move on. Joey, Vegas. Vegas is getting more popular as the season gets closer, with kind of everything they're throwing out for win totals, and now the over-under, which is ever so popular in Vegas before the season starts. And, of course, is the Las Vegas sportsbook operator CG Technology released regular season win totals for 50 college football teams. Of course, no surprise, Alabama, 10.5 for over-under, Ohio State at 10. If you go down the list, though, you get to Florida at 8, and that is even with Auburn, Oregon, and Georgia for the 8 right in front of them. Miami with 8.5, Michigan with 9, LSU with 9. So any surprises there, Joey? Would you have Florida at 8 over under, or kind of a little higher, or maybe 8.5? Somewhere around there, maybe.
I get the 8. I mean,
yeah.
You're going into the season with an unknown at the most important position in sports. So I understand where the 8 comes in. I would have it at 9 just because I think Florida's schedule is so favorable this year, just based on that. But
and that plays a lot into this number.
Okay, but I can't disagree with the 8. I can't argue with it. I would have it at 9 because I think that's where Florida's going to be. So that's why I say 9. I think if Florida wins over 9 games, I think that's exceeding expectations, and I think it's a successful year, especially with a new quarterback. And I think under 9 games, depending on how far under 9 games, I think would kind of be a letdown, and obviously would be a step back for McElwain, especially when there's this much talent on offense. So I'm setting it at 9. So if I'm a betting man and I'm going to Vegas with the 8, I take the over.
You take the over at 9. And just lets you know how close the SEC East is. Florida at 8, Georgia at 8, Tennessee 7.5. I mean, that's a half game within 3 teams there.
And see, they're picking the SEC East winner to have 8 wins, which isn't going to happen. I mean, that's not going to happen. Whoever wins the SEC East is probably
at least 9.
At least 9, if not 10.
Yeah. I mean, and that's happened with as down as the East has been the last couple of years, and even going back to, I say the last 4 years, I mean, even Missouri winning it. They were, I think, 9 or 10 wins. I'm not sure they ever got in with 8 wins, did they? They probably had more than 8 when they went to the 2 years before Florida.
I think Missouri was 10-2 and 11-1. I think. Yeah, I think they went 11-1 one of those 2 years.
Right. That's what I was thinking too. So
they were the winner of that game. Was a de facto national championship. Was a de facto. Play into the championship when they played Auburn. Do you remember? Auburn was undefeated, and Missouri had 1 loss that year.
That's right. Yep. Kind of forget that they played Auburn that year, and not Alabama.
Yeah.
But, so, Joey, if you look at the Florida schedule, okay, 2 guaranteed wins, Northern Colorado and UAB. So there's 2 right there. Then if you give them Kentucky and Vanderbilt, that's 4. Missouri, that's 5. South Carolina, that's 6. So you got to come up with 2 more wins to at least get up to the Vegas.
Tennessee at home. Revenge game.
Yep. So
Tennessee at home. I got LSU at home. And I have Texas A&M at home. I think Texas A&M's defense is going to be absolutely atrocious this year. And I think Florida can win that game, honestly, by 3 or 4 touchdowns if they want, because I think Florida's going to have their way offensively against Texas A&M's defense, especially in the swamp.
Yeah, and then you throw in Georgia too, and FSU as well. So, and bookend, of course, Michigan at the beginning of the season. So Michigan, FSU. I would say Florida fans would take 1-1 in that scenario.
Yeah.
You would love 2-0, of course, but 1-1 in that scenario. But yeah, I mean, I think six games where you could say Florida would be definite.
Prohibitive favorites.
To prohibitive favorites. And then you got to pick, out of Tennessee.
Probably 2 or 3 games that are toss-ups. I think Florida has a chance. I think Florida's going to be favored against Tennessee. I do, because it's at home, especially.
Yeah, early in the season, they'll definitely be favored at home.
And I think Florida will be favored against Texas A&M as well, especially depending on how the season has gone in September, for Florida. The LSU game, I don't know how LSU is going to be. So we don't know, but I do think Texas A&M is not going to be very good this year. So I have Florida being favored in that game. So, I think Florida's favored in 8 games out of 12 this year.
Wow, yeah. If you look at Tennessee, Kentucky, Vandy, A&M, Missouri, South Carolina, that gets you to 6, UAB. Yep, and I didn't count Northern Colorado. Yeah, so 8 games you would definitely think would be favored in.
Be favored, and I think there's 2 toss-ups. I think Florida could be favored in the LSU game, and I also think Florida could be favored in the Georgia game.
Yeah, because that game's late enough in the season. Yeah,
that could be 10 That could be 10, games where Florida is the favorite to win out of 12.
Yeah. I mean, if we're looking
depending on how Florida's season goes and Florida State's season goes, who knows what that game's going to hold at the end of the season.
Right. Yeah. I mean, if you peg the way everything looks now, just because Tennessee is so early in the season, you would think Florida would be favored. Unless only thing is, if Tennessee comes out and blows out Georgia Tech week 1 and Florida just falls flat on their face against Michigan, Tennessee could squeak in as the favorite there week 3. But being so early in the season, both teams are so close in expectations that home field advantage would probably at least sway the betting favorite there. So yeah,
and that's what Vegas is looking at, David. They're looking at what games Florida would be favored to win in. I believe that's what they're doing as far as the predictions, the over under. Because if you look at it, that would only make sense for the Georgia game, because I don't think they're ready to declare a favorite in the Florida-Georgia game yet. So I think they're leaving that kind of open. You know what I'm saying? So I think they're looking at 8 games on Florida's schedule and saying Florida would be favored in 8 games out of their 12. So that's why we're putting the over-under, because depending on how Florida's season goes, they could be favored in as many as 11 games, 12 games. Or depending on how their season goes, they could be favored in as little as 6 games. So that's why I think Vegas is putting that 8 on there, and I can't disagree with it.
No, you can't. You can't. And we like interacting with you fans out there. So I threw a poll up while I was in Mexico last week while I had some free time. Vegas has Gators over under win total at 8. What do you guys think? So over 8 won with 82% of the vote, and that was with near 300 votes there. So just some comments there. You were Gator bait. Anything under 9 is a failed season. Also, Chris Ferguson, anything under 9 should send Jimmy James Butters to Jonestown. So, a little shot at McAlway there. It was also Clint Lawrence. Not for so many home games, that would be right. Mac's record at home is solid, plus Frank's is going to be just fine. Jordan McGeever as well. Anything under 9 wins is a failure. Joey, your favorite Josh Gator critic, because he's torn between 8 and 9 right now. Kind of, seems kind of on your on your level there too. Between 8 and 9, you can see there. It goes depending on how healthy the team leaves fall camp. 10 is doable, but need legitimate steps from Nuss and the offense. So it looks like most Gator fans think 9 is kind of below 9. Is a failure. 9 is kind of the benchmark for this Gators team this year. So 9-3, going into that would more than likely be good for the winning the East. But according to what Tennessee and Georgia do and what games you lose there. But 3, you would have to assume 1 losses to Michigan or FSU. Could be both. So I
think Florida's ceiling is like 10 wins this year, David.
That's the ceiling.
But I think Florida's basement is higher. I think their basement is 7. So I think I could see 7 to 10 being somewhere where Florida's going to fall this year, because I think they're too good to have any, less wins than 7, barring, catastrophic injury. But I don't think they're there yet to get over 10.
Yeah, I'm going to keep an eye on that too, because if of course, we're getting a lot of feedback from Gator fans, so 9 wins kind of there. But it would be if we could keep up with that to see if it maybe jumps to 8.5, and that lets a lot of the public is thinking that way for the Gators.
Yep.
All right, Joey, anything else before we sign off on this one?
No, we're just wanted to say we will be back in 2 weeks. Next week's Memorial Day, so we will have the day off, just as well as most of you will out there. So I'll be in a golf tournament all day, so I will definitely not be able to to participate in a show on Monday night. I'll be out in the course for about 8 or 9 hours playing 2 rounds of golf on Saturday or on Monday. So, but we will look forward to being back with you in 2 weeks. Bill Sykes will be back, and we'll be at each other's throats again. So don't you worry. I'm sure we'll be discussing the Malik Zaire commitment in 2 weeks.
Yeah, I would think so. I mean, that would be the first. Yeah. That would be first week of June. So his decision should be made around that time. Yep. The SEC should make their decision, and we should mention that right before he did delay his decision when he was going to make it last week because it seemed like he was waiting on something. And that waiting seems to be if the SEC will change that rule for the grad transfer. So it looks like if you read the tea leaves out there and read some articles out there, it seems to be a Florida-Texas kind of battle right now. But if he's waiting, you would have to think that kind of signifies Florida's in the lead.
Yeah, and I cannot wait to see Twitter if he commits to the University of Florida because it will be the craziest day on that app.
You're right, and I mean, we've discussed it as much as we can, and it's still a popular topic. So either way, whether he doesn't come to Florida,
so many mixed emotions, so many mixed. You're going to have people on both sides of the aisle with extreme opinions.
Yeah, whether he does commit to Florida, whether he doesn't commit to Florida, it would be a big story either way. So we would definitely cover it. And like we said, we would not have a show next week. We'll spend Memorial Day with our family. To kind of be our first week without a show since I think we've launched. So so we'll hit the summer hard right after that. We'll tweet links to past shows or whatever, maybe do one of our favorite shows or something like that that we'll throw out there. But when we also get back in 2 weeks, it will kind of be preseason magazine time. So we'll discuss Malik Zaire, and we'll also look at preseason magazines and Athlon Lindy's out there and see what their thoughts are on the Gators and some interesting things to where we can debate and tear down if we agree with those publications out there.
It's crazy. When we come back in 2 weeks, we're only going to be about 10 or 11 weeks away from the start of the season. That's crazy.
You're right. It's kind of this podcast in a way. It's kind of helped it fly by a little bit.
Yep, absolutely. We'll be on our 365-day show anniversary at the end of the summer.
I'll have to look that up. Yeah, I'll have to see what day that was. We did our first episode, and that would be a fun little thing out there. So, Joey, is that it, my friend?
That's it, man. Happy Memorial Day to everybody out there, and thoughts and prayers with those in Manchester, England tonight. Just a terrible situation.
For sure. So for Joey, you can find him on Twitter at JoeyV_SEC Sports. Bill, who didn't join us, you can find Bill Sykes on Twitter at RealBSykes. And I'm your host, David Waters, on Twitter at GatorDave_SEC. And guys and girls out there, thanks for listening to Gators Breakdown.